Hey, Larkin Rose here. You know what's kind of weird that just occurred to me? I mean, it's occurred to me before. I spend huge amounts of time and effort working on ways to try to get people to basically embrace their own freedom, embrace their own self-ownership, to stop thinking and acting like slaves, like the subjects of an authoritarian ruling class, and to try to convince them to stop advocating the authoritarian domination of everybody else and themselves too. So that's mostly what I do. I do it in lots of different ways. Jones Plantation, the movie, that's kind of the point of that, to have people see through those games so they stop falling for them. Most Dangerous Superstition, that's why I wrote that. Jones Plantation novel, that's why I wrote that. Iron Web, my first novel, that's why I wrote that. The mirror thing I'm working on that you may or may not have heard of, and I'm not going to elaborate on it now, is why I've been working on that for years, and I'm working on that a lot more recently. Candles in the Dark, the course we made. That's why I do that. So I put in tons of effort and countless articles and videos, all focused around that general idea of having people understand that they own themselves, and that the notion of them being beholden to some imaginary authority is bogus, and it just ends up pitting people against people and rewards sociopaths and psychos to the detriment of everybody else's freedom and prosperity and everything else. So almost everything I do is to try to get people to understand that. I try to do things that result in a free humanity. The funny thing is, and it's an uphill battle because most people have been so trained into statism, they resist that. And a lot of them get mad at me and yell at me and, oh, it was good for me to vote for this guy to save the day. Funny thing is, or the sad thing is, if my goal was the opposite and I knew everything I know now, like if starting today I decided, I think instead, I'm tired of trying to get humanity to be free. My new goal is to enslave humanity. I would be really good at it. Well, if I didn't have a soul or a conscience. If I got a conscience-ectomy, I would be really good at it, and I could easily enslave every single one of you who voted for Trump or the Democrats or anybody in the last gazillion years. Easily. Now, you could say, oh, come on, you think so? Yes, I do think so. Want to know how I can demonstrate it? Because I wrote a book called How to Be a Successful Tyrant, and it describes absolutely everything that all of you have been falling for. All of you who aren't voluntarists yet. Including a bunch of people who called themselves voluntaries. Oh, but now we need to vote for Trump. Yeah, I wrote all that too. I described exactly how they did that. For those of you who haven't seen the video, I'll post a link below. I described in that book, 15 years before it happened, COVID. Exactly what was going to happen. I described the method of scaring people with an exaggerated or made-up disease and insisting that only giving government tons of money and power could save everybody, and everybody would be so scared. And I said you could basically do that with the common flu, which is what they did. And I described it 15 years earlier because I understand how these evil psychos work. But it wasn't just that. That was one example. There are lots of examples. So I'm going to read this. This is also from this book that is now 20 years old. I wrote this and came out in 2005. So here you go. Now, keep in mind, this book is written as if it's a manual for aspiring tyrants. So it's telling tyrants how to dupe the peasants. In other words, how to dupe you. So this is me writing about how tyrants would dupe you. Listen carefully, because for those of you who voted for Trump or had any hope in him, it worked. This is me 20 years ago describing what they were going to do to you to dupe your sorry ass. And they did, and it worked. Quote, now, I use a number of examples. I think in this case I was using the example of the war on drugs, which is now coming up again with Trump committing war crimes by randomly blowing people up in a boat and saying, oh, well, they were drug dealers. You got to do it. Evil frickin' psycho. But anyway, that was the example that the book had just talked about when it got to this point. But listen to the exact same words and the exact same ideas and apply it to those scary illegal aliens. And tell me if I didn't describe exactly what you fell for when pushed by Mango Mussolini and these stupid stooges and stupid puppets of the state doing what they always do. This is me describing that 20 years before you fell for it. Quote, when using the technique of control via criminalization, in other words, you make something a crime to control people, like walking over a line, you must be able to demonize a behavior in the eyes of enough of the peasants that you can perpetually enforce its prohibition. So you take something like walking over a line, or the example I was using here of growing the wrong plant, you declare it to be illegal, and then you convince people to hate anybody who did that illegal thing. Not because they hurt anybody or harmed anybody, but just because they disobeyed some arbitrary edict from a bunch of political parasites. And then, if you can demonize the people who do that, then you can perpetually enforce the prohibition of that made-up crime. However, it continues, you don't want to actually stop or even reduce the behavior itself, or the law will give you no power. You just want to be able to kidnap and cage those who engage in it without triggering a violent backlash from the peasants. In addition to making criminals, such efforts can also be used to justify the use of intrusive and oppressive tactics in general. When asking for the powers, always assure the peasants that you will use those powers only against nasty criminals. Once the peasants concede that your thugs need such powers, you are free to use those powers against any peasant who displeases you. End quote. Now, I could sit here and read the whole book, because everything Trump does, I described. Everything Biden does, I described. I described it before either of them were president. Described it before Trump was ever in office. Biden's been in office forever, so I don't think my book came out before he was already a political parasite. But I describe all of this because I know how these tactics work. And the fact that I describe it and they still work, and I can describe it and the politicians can do exactly what I described, and even a bunch of supposedly pro-freedom people will still fall for it, when I exactly described, here's how the trick works, here's how they manipulate you, here is how they will trick you into cheering against your own freedom. And then they do, and it works. So that's why I say, if tomorrow I got a conscience-ectomy and suddenly didn't have a soul and was willing to help the oppressors, any of you who voted for Trump or Biden or anybody, any of you who believes in a political solution at all, I would absolutely be able to enslave you really quickly. Now, I wouldn't be dumb enough to have me as the spokesperson. I would have somebody more charismatic and good-looking and all that. But they would be saying my words, because I know exactly what needs to be said to dupe your stupid ass into advocating slavery, if you think it's actually there to protect you, and say, well, these scary drug dealers are. Yeah, they fabricated that problem. The ruling class created the drug cartels, created the drug gangs by fabricating this black market and calling it the war on drugs. They did that on purpose to get stupid people to cheer for violations of Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, presumption of innocence, due process, all that. And look how much authoritarian crap has been done in the name of the war on drugs. But hey, at least drugs went away. Oh wait, they didn't? You mean exactly what I wrote 20 years ago is what actually happened? They weren't trying to do away with the problem? They were just trying to fabricate a problem that they could point at and go, scary, 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 better give us lots of power. Better let us search you. Better let us be able to pull you over and have a dog who's trained to move in a certain way so we can go, oh, well, that's probable cause. Now we can rip your car apart looking for drugs. That's why they did it, to use it against you. No, they really want to stamp out drugs. Well, then probably the CIA wouldn't be the biggest drug runner in the world. If the U.S. government actually wanted to end drugs, they could just abolish their own CIA. That would end most of the trafficking. But they don't want to. And the fact that I've described all these things, now, I don't describe them as a fan of them. I describe them with the hope that people will learn from them and stop falling for this crap. But the fact that I know how to do these, and I could do way better statist propaganda than Trump did. He did a lame job. It was pathetic that any of you fell for that crap. I could have done way more convincing anti-establishment propaganda to get you exuberantly cheering for your own enslavement. Now, it wouldn't be called that, wouldn't be described that way. But this sort of lazy, short-term, idiot propaganda that Trumpite did, the fact that that worked on anybody is just pathetic. Like, it's bad enough if you fall for, like, a clever con man doing a clever trick. Falling for Trump is not falling for a clever con man. It's falling for just a narcissistic imbecile puppet of the machine. Like, if you fell for that, you would absolutely fall for the crap that I could write if I had no soul and no conscience. You'd all be cheering. We'd have a new version of the Soviet Union or Red China or Nazi Germany where all the people are gratefully and excitedly and happily cheering for their new political savior, and then they get stomped on and enslaved and robbed blind, as has happened over and over again in history. Because my propaganda would be way better than the Democrats or Republicans are capable of, and you're already falling for that crap. So you would absolutely fall for what I would come up with. And you would believe yourselves to be pro-freedom while doing it. And you think you'd be anti-establishment. Yeah, we're going to show them. Sure, we have to grab some police state powers and militarize the police. And in fact, make the military into the police. Heck with posse comitatus. This is an emergency. We need to... Rah, rah, rah. I'd have you cheering for it. If you voted for Trump, if I had no soul and I worked for the ruling class, I would have you cheering for your own enslavement. And you have absolutely demonstrated that you are so stupid that I could personally absolutely have you cheering for your own enslavement if I had no conscience and worked for the machine. So you should probably be glad I don't. Because the fact that you fell for Trump or Democrats or any of the crap, Obama, Bush, Clinton, it doesn't matter. Even Reagan was the best bullshitter in my lifetime. He did the best job pretending to be anti-government and anti-establishment. Coming out and saying government is not the solution, government is the problem. Yay, that is absolutely true. Then what happened? He increased the warmongering and basically created the war on drugs, which demolished the Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, a whole bunch of other things. Just drastically expanded the police state fascist bullshit. That's what Reagan actually did. His rhetoric was awesome. If the goal was to dupe people who love freedom into going rah, rah, rah for a political savior. I mean, his rhetoric compared to Trump is a babbling moron compared to Reagan. He did some quality bullshit and tricked a lot of people who were more or less pro-freedom into cheering for something that made there be less freedom. But you know how he did that? He pointed to certain aspects of it and go, we're going to reduce these taxes. And some of the taxes came down. Because you see, an intelligent tyrant, the goal isn't to hurt the peasants as much as possible. The goal is to exploit them as much as possible. Well, you need them to be productive to do that. And the idiots who ran communist dictatorships, Stalin and Mao, crashed their whole stupid game. Mao's great leap forward, where he's impoverishing and starving to death 40-some million of his own people. Well, now you're the great, powerful leader and ruler of nothing. It's a giant economic catastrophe because you're an idiot. That's stupid. If you're going to be a successful tyrant, the goal is to exploit them and enrich and empower yourselves. They have to be able to produce something of value in order to exploit them. And the commie dumbasses didn't even understand that enough, and they crashed and burned their own stupid human livestock plantations, which an intelligent tyrant could do a way better job than that. Now, to a large degree, the U.S. parasitical ruling class has been a far more effective tyrant, in part measured by the fact that most of the people who wave the flag, land of the free, that utter bullshit, they still believe that. And they work their asses off to get robbed blind to have a ruling class that stole way more wealth. The U.S. ruling class stole way more wealth than the Soviet Union ever did, simply because they knew how to whip their livestock enough, but let them free enough that they could actually produce some wealth to steal, instead of whipping the cattle to death and go, oh, well, now we're the boss of a giant catastrophe. Now, U.S. rulers are getting stupider and stupider. Maybe they should hire me. Sorry, I still have a conscience and a soul. But if I didn't, they should absolutely hire me. And every single one of you Trump supporters, every single one of you Kamala supporters, Biden supporters. In fact, for this stage in the clown show, I could get all of you to agree and be on the same side. And that's something that most of the time the political parasites don't do, because divide and conquer is their game. It's what Trump's doing. It's what Biden did. We're going to bring in lots of immigrants, enough that people start to get a very negative connotation, because why am I working my ass off and getting taxed? And that guy just got shipped in from other country and he's given free room and board. That's not fair. No, it's not fair. Did it ever occur to you to wonder, why would they do that? Is it just because they're Democrats? No, you idiot. They're puppets of the same machine Trump's a puppet of. They did it so you would resent those people because they're getting these free handouts. Or you think they are. A bunch of illegal aliens are just coming here and working their butts off, and they're not getting handouts at all. But if you can think that of them, and if they can point to some examples of unfairness, if they can generate unfairness intentionally, they can trick you into being stupid enough that you cheer for more authoritarian power and less freedom in the name of immigration controls. We need a border control. We need a beautiful wall. And we need to bring in just police state fascism. Fourth and Fifth Amendment just out the stinking window. No due process. Heck with that. Because scary immigrants. Well, why is everybody scared of immigrants? Because the government set up a thing to make that look scary, and you fell for it. Biden and Trump are on the same team. They're just puppets of the same machine. So they mostly play divide and conquer. But every once in a while, you can bring along a puppet who sort of unites both sides. And Reagan sort of did that. A lot of Democrats voted for Reagan because he was down to earth and he was all these reasons, all these propaganda reasons. And then authoritarian power grew over here and grew over there. But this tax came down, and this tax, okay, did it keep going down? No. Did they steal more than ever before? Yeah. And I even see conservatives brag about, sometimes if you reduce taxes, government revenues increase. Is your goal increasing the amount of money government gets? Because holy crap, if that's your goal, you're not pro-freedom. It's totally true that lowering taxes, depending on where you are and what the situation was, can increase productivity. Because, you rob people so bad that they're all like, why should I bother working or producing anything? No, if you decrease taxes, people go, I can go earn some money. And then you steal pretty much from them, but pretty much of something they're producing is still more than all of nothing they're producing, because they're not producing anything. There's some basic economics for you. So when tax cuts come down and revenues go up, which, by the way, Trump, well, he lied. He lies about everything. But when he brags about, no, we're going to have more revenue. He's bragging about, we brought in, his claims got delusional. He literally claimed $8 trillion in revenue from tariffs. That's what they said. Now, how many levels of delusion and what nutcases, like, quietly didn't dare to correct somebody before saying that? Because that's just bonkers. But what they're doing is bragging about how much money they stole from you, and a bunch of Trumpites are cheering for it. Yay, the government brought in a whole bunch of money. They brought it in from you, dumbass. They robbed you, bragged to you about it, and you applauded the fact that they stole more from you than they did before. That's what tariffs are. They're taxes on Americans. So even something like that, like, oh, lowering taxes. It's like saying, this new slave plantation manager dramatically reduced whippings. Yay, he's a good guy, right? Well, what was the purpose? So they work harder because you were whipping them so hard that you were injuring them, and some of them were dying, and you can't pick cotton if you're dead. So this new manager knows, not out of love, not out of caring, not having anything to do with truth or justice or freedom, but just managing livestock, the new manager says, okay, whip them less so they can be more productive. If they're totally in pain and suffering and have nothing to lose, they're not very good workers. If we can find that balance where they make as much productivity for us to steal as possible, that's the ideal goal. That's what governments go for. That's why you get the back and forth. It's why tax rates go like this. They want to steal as much as they can without killing the golden goose. And commies tend to be idiots who then ruin it and kill the golden goose, and then they're whining about the fact that, hey, how come tax revenues went down because we tax everybody at 100%? Why would you think anybody was going to work if you're stealing literally everything they produce? Oh, well, then we're only going to tax them 90%. No, they're still not going to work. Well, if you move it down to the right level, you can maximize the amount you're robbing people, but still have them benefit from their own work enough that they're still working. That is how you view livestock. That is how Trump, Biden, the entire machine, Democrats, Republicans, that's how all of them view you. You are livestock to them. And the fact that I could write their propaganda better than them and have you cheering for your own enslavement, the irony is you should probably be pretty glad that I have a conscience and a soul and a moral code. Because my finances would be outstanding if I switched sides and became a propagandist for the machine, because most of them suck at it now. You know, many, many years ago, decades ago, they had Edward Bernays, who was a genius. Evil genius, but he was good at propaganda and psychology and manipulation. They suck at it now. They're bumbling idiots compared to what they used to be. I could do a way better job than they could. And if I did that, if I didn't have a soul, I'd be rich as hell. I could do anything I wanted. If I was an evil psychopath, I'd be really good at their BS. As you can see if you read the How to Be a Successful Tyrant. Which you can't, because it's out of print currently. I'm working on making the second edition back in print as soon as I can, among the 57 billion other things I'm doing, all of which are trying to convince people to be free. And I got robbed into destitution many years ago and caged for a year for trying to make people be more free. In that case, for pointing out that federal extortion racket doesn't even legally rob people, much less morally, but that's a different discussion. Never mind that for now. So yeah, I got robbed into destitution, lost my house, we lost our business, lots of things, because I was trying to have people be more free. If my conscience ever falls out and I decide I want people more enslaved, I'm going to be rich as hell really quick, because I'm way better at their propaganda than they are. It's just that little thing of having a moral conscience getting in the way. Darn it. But yeah, I'd be rich as hell. I would be your master if you voted for Trump. Now, it probably wouldn't be my face. I wouldn't be the puppet. I don't sound suave enough and I don't look handsome enough to be the puppet out there. But the puppet out there is never the one in charge anyway. I could be pretty high up in the ranks of people who treat you like livestock and rob the shit out of you and have anything they want courtesy of loot they stole from you while you cheered for their puppets. And every once in a while it strikes me the irony of how successful I could be if only I didn't have a soul and a conscience. Because I'm way better than most of their propagandists at doing their propaganda. And you can, if you don't believe me, sometime check out How to Be a Successful Tyrant, which is currently out of print. I will end this video by pointing out there is about to be one way that you can actually get How to Be a Successful Tyrant. Not in hard copy, but in audiobook form, which is, I'm halfway through reading the first version out loud to people who subscribe to the Rose Channel. It's therosechannel.com. That maybe I'll just give a short rundown of what that, it's a monthly subscription thing. I do a ton of stuff for free. But on that channel, it has the whole Candles in the Dark course. You can go through it as many times as you want. A thing called Tiny Candles that goes along with that. Another thing called Making Anarchy Mainstream that goes along with that. 200 or 100 and some audio podcast things that are just for subscribers. 15, 16, 17 videos that are just for subscribers. The audiobook of The Most Dangerous Superstition, just for subscribers. And we have regular, there's several little mini event seminar things we've done about different things that are just there for subscribers. And there's a bunch of stuff. I'm probably missing a bunch of stuff, but that's therosechannel.com. And what I'm halfway through doing, and half of it is now posted there, is reading How to Be a Successful Tyrant piece by piece and posting chunks of it as we go. So I'm halfway through that. Still got to keep going with that. So if you want it now, I'm going to let you know the little cheapskate secret is, if you want, you can subscribe for a month and get all that stuff really quick and learn stuff, and then unsubscribe and get a ridiculous amount of stuff for, I think it's $30 a month. So you can do it for a month and chicken out if you feel like it. But there's a ton of stuff there. But I bring it up because that's the only place I know to get How to Be a Successful Tyrant, the Megalomaniac Manifesto, which, if you read that and you're at all paying attention to current events, you have to notice that I describe all of it. Now, that's not because I'm a prophet or super genius. It's because I've studied how tyrants do this, and that hasn't changed. The details change a little bit with technology and different situations. But everything you fell for from any political candidate ever, I described in that book, describing to somebody how to be a successful tyrant. So I know how you fall for it. I know how they trick you into falling for it. And you should probably be a little bit happy that I still have a soul and a conscience. Because if I didn't, I would go to them and I'd be making billions convincing you to cheer for your own enslavement. Because if the crap that Trump spewed or Biden spewed or the rest of them made you vote or have any hope in a political solution, then you would absolutely fall for the propaganda I would throw at you if I worked for them and I had no soul. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, unfortunately for my finances, but fortunately for my soul and maybe humanity, I'm not going to be their propagandist. I'm going to keep having people hate me as I advocate that they be free. Which is really weird, but such is life. But the fact that I can describe the games, I can describe the tricks, I can tell you what's going to happen before it happened. I said what was going to happen with Trump before he was elected the first time. People are like, no, this is going to be different. Now a bunch of people are like, oh, golly gee, you were right. So it's not like it's a mystery if you understand history. That was an accidental poem. If you understand how the propagandists work, you understand the tricks of divide and conquer and false flag and all sorts of games that psychopaths have used for centuries. It's not that hard to know what they're going to do next. And if you understand it, then maybe you won't fall for it. But mostly I'm out here trying to warn people, here's what you're about to fall for next. And then I watch them fall for it and cheer for their own enslavement. And go out there and cheer for, we don't need due process. We don't need the Fifth Amendment either. We don't need trials. Yeah, the president should be able to just blow people up in a boat somewhere. No trial, no evidence, no proof, not even in U.S. waters. No jurisdiction, just commit war crimes. And we'll cheer for it because they were bad people. And we know that because the government said they were bad people. And if the government says somebody deserves to die, well, I'm willing to take their word for it. Holy crap, people. Just holy crap. So, does it sometimes occur to me that lots of the world may not really deserve the freedom I want for them? Yeah, they absolutely don't. However, a human being owns himself and is entitled to freedom. I hate to call it an entitlement. Even if they're too dumb to want it for themselves. So, gonna keep doing what I'm doing. Struggling along. Be thankful that I'm not on the other side. Because given what I've watched some of you fall for, I could very easily enslave your ass and have you cheering for your oppressors till you die of old age. Yeehaw.